the first thing I did was I got really clear on what I was looking for. I've had a chance to help dozens and dozens of people find their first larger multi-deal. And the ones that I just want any deal, Mandy. I don't even know. Just like whatever deal I find, I just want a deal. Like you find nothing because you don't know what you're looking for, right? So if you apply your limiting factors and work backwards, then you're really able to get focused and see the thing that you're looking for.
Yo, what is up, everybody? I am Matt Drew, and I'm the host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Podcast, the show to listen to and to watch if you are a tired real estate investor that owns maybe a couple duplexes and wants to achieve financial independence and banging their head against the wall and mystified when it comes to scaling up and doing bigger deals. I am psyched out of my mind today to have on Mandy McAllister, who is not only CEO of GoBundance Women, also a can I say a full-time real estate investor? Okay, all right, yeah, full-time real estate investor. And her real estate expertise includes repositioning underperforming assets to increase cash flow and value. Her portfolio is currently comprised of 373 doors of B-class workforce housing, furnished student housing, and a motel reposition. She is most proud to be mama to her hilarious 8-year-old son, Duncan, who coincidentally wants to be a real estate investor when he grows up. I definitely want to talk about that one because I drive by my buildings. We own some buildings downtown that dot the Rochester city skyline. And I take my daughter to school and she points out the window and I'm like, Daddy, those are your buildings. I was like, hey, those are going to be yours someday. She's like, Daddy, I don't want your buildings. And she's 4 years old. So she knows what's up. So Mandy, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, Matt, I'm so excited to be here. I love that story. I can't wait to hear more about her too.
Oh yeah. She's a little spitfire in the making. So, well, first thing, I gave you a brief intro, but I want you to tell your story. So you were born, now you're here. What happened in between?
I love this question. I've never been asked in that way. So, big high five in the world of podcasts to you. I think the big epiphany that I had is that I have a choice in the matter. It's kind of the nexus of all of the purple books, the Rich Dad Poor Dad stuff. That I was the little girl who got straight A's, who was going to go to med school, who was going to be the perfect Division I athlete, that was going to do like all of the playbook that you're supposed to do to be the perfect human. And then life happened, and I realized, oh my goodness, I get one go round. I get to be the one to pick what I do with my life, and ended up not going to medical school because I didn't want to be on call, and then was on call in a sales job. So I decided to lean into living the life of my dreams because I get a choice in this.
Absolutely. So tell me about when you started thinking about constructing your big, beautiful life.
So this idea of must be real estate investor hit me at 19. A friend was explaining that her dad bought the house we were standing on the porch of, and that she got to rent out the rooms to our friends. And then she got to keep that money. That was the best idea I'd ever heard. So that seed was planted. And then, the fear of messing up, because I had been this perfect kid my entire life that never made a single misstep. And the nature of entrepreneurship is failing forward, is making mistakes and learning from them. I think one of the big life-changing events, like it's for anybody who has kids, like it hit me like a ton of bricks that I get one go round. And not only is it me chasing my dreams now, it's me showing a kid how to chase their dreams. Right. So, I started with something that felt like a small step. I thought I was going to die and be homeless and penniless under a bridge by buying a $120,000 fourplex in the beginning. But, it's everything is a muscle, and learning how to work through the fear of new stuff has really been the progression of my life in the last, call it 10 years.
Absolutely, Mandy. So let's talk about how did you grow up? Tell me about home.
Yeah, I am a farm kid. So if you ever need to bale hay, I can certainly help with that. So my dad farms. We had cattle, we had horses, and then town of 800 people. So I ended up following where volleyball took me, and 88 Division I schools, went to 4 Division I schools looking at me after I ripped my ACL, and then process of elimination, ended up at a school in Georgia. The day after commencement there, ended up moving to the city of Chicago because I craved this anonymity, so ended up, building a life for 14 years in Chicago, and now I'm out in the burbs. So that the work ethic that comes with being a farm kid, the quiet that comes with being alone in your own thoughts, where there's no hustle and bustle around you, is something that I hope everybody gets a chance to experience.
Absolutely. So you start with the fourplex, and one thing that I'm really interested in teasing out here is that I wouldn't say you're skeptical of, going huge. We're going to talk about, and you and I are kind of kindred spirits, and the name of the show is Go Big, but it's kind of like Go Big-ish. And you found a niche, which I've found in terms of that smaller deal space that flies under the radar of, the institutional players, ones you can put together the capital with smaller groups. We talk about going big, but also keeping your circle smaller, which I'm a fan of because, it's like I want to be able to, I can't deal with hundreds of people and, doing this stuff. My mind just doesn't work that way. I'm a recovering, ADD elementary school daydreamer. And the thought of that is just terrifying. And I'm really glad that we're illuminating your first big deal that was big to you at the time and exactly how you did that. But before we do that, what was your conditions before you did that? And maybe what was the seminal moment where you're like, damn, I don't think this smaller real estate stuff is really going to take me to living and creating that life by design that I want for myself and my family.
Yeah, totally. You're a nail on the head, my friend. So I kind of grew up through multifamily. I love this idea of getting around people who are doing what I'm doing or doing things bigger than what I'm doing. And I've built a ton of success by getting close to people who are doing stuff like that. And, in so doing, when I wanted to add a zero to the end of the fourplex, I wanted to be around people that were doing that. Well, one guy, he also worked in a medical device company. So I was a medical device sales rep and he worked with another company. And I asked him, how will you know as a syndicator that you're going to be able to leave your W-2, right? Because as a syndicator, you're really making the money. It's basically the flipping of large buildings, right? So you make that NOI pretty and then you sell it for a big profit and you're beholden to these investors in the meantime, right? So he said, all I got to do is buy this one and I get this acquisition fee and sell that one and I get that acquisition fee. So all I got to do is 4 deals a year. And I thought, oh my God, what happens when interest rates tick up really fast and you can't find 4 deals worth doing? Are you going to do crappy deals and sell that to the people that you know? Are you going to do that? How are you going to feed your family? So in that moment, I realized that what I want to build, what I need to build to have this certainty in my life to be able to go chase my dreams is a floor of income coming in predictably every single month. Right? You do things like exchange your time for money, which you get paid once for, or even a syndication, you get that acquisition fee once, or flip a house, you get that money one time. I call that one-time money. Use that one-time money to set up what I call forever money, something that you own by yourself or with just a few partners that is going to pay you in your inbox every single month, right? So once you reach that floor of income, that's when you can go chase your dreams in a different level. So that big decision is really kind of what's colored my entire approach now.
So tell me about this big deal. The light bulb went off that, hey, I want to add a zero behind this and 10x my that's 10x, right? Adding a zero to it. Yeah, my wife's a math teacher, so she always criticizes me. So thank you, Nicole. But let's talk about that deal. How many deals did you look at? What was your methodology for finding opportunities, identifying the market? Tell me all about that in terms of its inception.
I having learned a lot about multifamily, one of the things that drew me to it and made me think that this is how the rich get richer, was this idea of the type of loan that you can put on a property. This idea of non-recourse debt that, oh my gosh, if I don't do these bad boy things, which I've been working hard to be perfect my whole life, so obviously I'm not going to do these bad boy things, then it's going to be a non-recourse loan. That seems like what I need to chase even above the cash flowing asset, right? The loan is the asset unto itself. So I knew I hadn't had the experience to do it. And I knew that I didn't have the net worth to go buy the $4 million building that it would take potentially to make it happen. So the first thing I did was I got really clear on what I was looking for. right? So I think, I've had a chance to help dozens and dozens of people find their first larger multi deal. And the ones that I just want any deal, Mandy. I don't even know. Just like whatever deal I find, I just want a deal. Like you find nothing because you don't know what you're looking for, right? So if you apply your limiting factors and work backwards, then you're really able to get focused and see the thing that you're looking for, right? So I knew that I don't love Illinois because it's taken me up to 26 months to evict people in Illinois. So I knew that that wasn't where I wanted to 10X or grow my portfolio, right? But not far from me in Indiana, they have much more reasonable laws that if you're a person playing the game as a tenant, then you can be taken out of that housing. So I knew Indianapolis because it had the growth metrics that I wanted to see. I knew Class B because I didn't want Class A because that gets hurt real fast on a downturn. And I knew I wanted agency debt. Right. So I was so clear on the thing that I was looking for that I got on a bunch of lists of brokers and I underwrote everything I saw. And I talked with as many people as I could who wanted similar stuff. And then, two of us who were, on the growth phase of things met a man who had a different problem than us. His problem that he had a bunch of liquidity that he needed to place and hadn't really ventured into apartment buildings and wanted to be active, right? So we had this very clear path and started underwriting deals with the knowledge that we had this extra $1 million to help place because it is a problem, right? It's just a different problem than what I had when I was getting started. And we ended up finding a 53 unit in Speedway, Indiana. It's really close to, obviously where the Speedway is. And having dug into that market, we learned that the Penske family had just bought the Speedway and incredible things happened when they bought the Arizona Speedway to that surrounding area. So we felt like it was a really good bet, but buying a 53 unit, $4.2 million asset was very different than the 4s and the 6s and the 10s that had felt really comfortable.
Yeah. So you mentioned two other people. Like, who were these people? How did you meet them? Like, how did you start, building that?
So I didn't know anybody doing the stuff I was doing. And to all of my people in my day job, all of the people in my family, when I wanted to start going bigger or buying buildings at all, they thought I was crazy. Right. So I knew in my heart that I wasn't. So I just needed to get around people who were doing the things that I was doing. So there was no multifamily meetup in the area that I was living in. So I just started one. Right? Like I realized that I can't be the only one who wants to scratch this itch and just made friends. And the cool thing about being the person at the front of the room is that I could invite all of the people that I was curious about the thing they represented. I had a co-star guy, a 1031 exchange specialist, like all of these things that I wanted to ask questions of this person. And I got to scratch my own itch. And it turns out that a commercial broker in the Chicagoland area attended some of my meetups. And I grew a friendship with him. I loved the way that he looked at multifamily. I, to this day, consider him one of the brightest minds in multifamily. And then he, through his brokerage, had this friend who needed to place capital, right? So that is how that deal all came about. And it first started with clarity because you cannot hit a fuzzy target.
Yeah, clarity. I mean, I think a lot of people have the fear that if I'm too clear and too specific, then I'm going to get pigeonholed in this thing and then I'm going to I'm going to get nothing out of it. So a lot of investors make the mistake of saying, well, I'm just looking for anything that makes sense. I'm looking for anything that makes money. And the one advantage to being super crystal clear on what you're looking for is that people will remember you by your criteria. And I actually get better deal flow by being hyper specific about what I'm looking for because I actually get opportunities that are outside of that because hey man, I know you're the guy that likes to buy pretty historic brick buildings, but I have a property that was built in the 1980s and it's got a brick facade, but it's not like the typical so actually having that engages the reticular activation system in that person's mind that thinks of you, whether it's another investor, another broker, and really, really leads to actually a better deal flow and the more specific you are. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. I completely agree in 1,000 ways, right? Like this idea of priming your brain to look for the thing you want to look for. Having helped dozens and dozens of people, the one that says, eightplex, Omaha, Nebraska, this zip code, pitched roof, they find 3 and they buy 1. But if you do like I did my first couple years of trying to go bigger, like Kansas City and Indianapolis both met the criteria. And I would think, oh, but they're doing this in Kansas City. Oh, but that in Indianapolis. And I FOMO'd my way to nothing. And actually a book that kind of really crystallized these thoughts for me, The Psychology of Money, is again in this idea of trying to be perfect. I don't need to be perfect with how I place my money. I just need to be reasonable enough. And is it reasonable enough to place my money in something that meets all of these growth criteria? And yes, it was. So I feel like reasonable enough has really informed my approach as well.
So Mandy, you made it sound very easy. Oh, I just found a 53 unit, and I had, I did a meetup. I met a couple people, and the rest is history. I mean, let's talk about like maybe the patience that was involved. Like, how many deals did you actually underwrite, that you looked at, that you walked, that you wrote LOIs on, that went nowhere, that led up to this opportunity?
I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't note that the market has cycles, right? To not believe in cycles is like to not believe in Tuesdays, and Tuesdays keep happening. So when I was in full growth buy mode, when that first 53 happened, it was, 2020. It was at a time when interest rates were very different than they are today. So more deals did pencil. So we probably underwrote, I'd call it 100 or so before we saw something that made enough sense to start walking. And then, we trusted our judgment that this is going to work, and went under contract right as COVID was the scariest thing and everybody was going to die, right? And I have got to tell you that I felt like I was a newly single mom. I had just gotten divorced a year prior. Like, I felt like I was going to be homeless and penniless and under a bridge, and people who loved me were acting in my best interest by asking me, like, do you feel like this is responsible? That you are going to take out a $3 million mortgage as an unemployed single mom? When you look at it like that, like, I understand the judgment and them trying to question me, right? But I had done the work to trust my own judgment. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, there comes a point where a leap can be irresponsible, but once you've asked the right questions and have convinced yourself and the right people, the right experts around you, that it is reasonable enough, you've got to take the plunge, right? So I want to say a couple things on that were really kind of helpful to me, just in the messy middle, because I think that matters so much, right? And is really probably the meat of what you're trying to get to. That I realized, I'd been reading a lot of Stoic philosophy at the time. I realized, like, oh wait, like, will a toilet break? Will the fence not work? Well, yes, all of those things will happen if you are considering yourself an entrepreneur. If you're jumping into entrepreneurship, understand you are signing up to fix problems, right? You are, the only thing that you're doing is you're going to start fixing problems, right? But what is the actual worst case scenario? Right? And then, so thinking that through about this 53 unit in particular, the actual worst case scenario is that we wouldn't be able to collect enough money to pay the note back. And then the building would go back to the lender, right? So that's a math problem, Matt. You can just figure out where your economic vacancy break-even point is. How many people can choose not to pay you? Or can you not have people in there paying you such that you can still afford to pay your debt service? Well, we needed like a 53% occupancy. We could be 47% economically vacant or something in that neighborhood to be able to still pay our mortgage. Well, what great. Well, this was COVID, and we knew that people were losing their jobs, and we knew the types of jobs that people were losing: the bartenders, the manicures, the heavy service industry people. So then we were able to ask the property manager for the applications for the people who lived in those buildings. And we were able to actually see their jobs. Like, is this an at-risk job, or is it not? So when we said at-risk job, not at-risk job, 5% of the people had at-risk jobs, and we could withstand a 47% vacancy. Again, reasonable enough. Worst case scenario mitigated.
Absolutely. So how did you know that this was the opportunity, that was the deal? Like, how did you actually make heads or tails of it from an underwriting standpoint?
So a lot of reps. I feel like the only way to trust your judgment in underwriting is to do the math. And that is another reason that I try to convince people to just have one market. Because if you're talking about like, well, what is the price? How much does it cost for property management? Is a bill back going to be appropriate here for utilities? Well, I don't freaking know. I don't know anything about Albuquerque. You tell me. You become the expert in Albuquerque. The only thing I know are the couple of markets that I've become an expert on. So until you know that this rent will work on this side of the highway and not on that side of the highway, you can't really trust the assumptions you're making, because an assumption at its core, no matter how good you are, is a guess. And when you understand that the best of the best, the Ken McElroys, the big dogs, they are just guessing when it comes to what's going to happen with that property, it took a lot of pressure off of me. So specializing in a single market really helped me realize a deal when I saw a deal.
So let's talk about. You had the capital partner for this deal lined up, and that's another thing too. Is like, if you guys are wondering, does the money come first or the deal comes first? I mean, I think 95% of the guests I've had in this show, of the 70 episodes we've recorded, like the money comes first before the deal. So we got that out of the way with Mandy here. So let's talk about like the actual structure of the partnership. Like, tell me about that, and who brought what to the table? Did you have to bring cash to the table, or, and all that good stuff?
So in this very first deal, the outcome that I wanted to achieve was the experience of having been on an agency debt loan. So if you don't know what an agency debt loan is, that's a whole other animal and we don't have time to cover it, right? But you have to basically have been on that loan, have had that loan in order to go get that loan. And my ultimate goal was to be able to go get those by myself, right? So we went in pro rata. I brought in 110 or something thousand. That guy brought in close to $1 million. So we were roughly, 10% was me, 10% was the other growth mode guy, 80% was the guy who brought the bulk of the capital. So that is how we did it. But the reason I did that deal largely was just to, one, cut my teeth, right? And be someone who closes on large buildings in that area. But then two, to have the experience to go get that type of debt for myself when the time comes.
Absolutely. So I'm assuming that the money person was the key principal and the guarantor on the loan then?
We all sign on the loan. That is you have to have signed on the loan to go get that debt on your own. So my whole thing was I need to be one signing on the loan. We had an LLC that we formed to buy the property, and then we had an operating agreement that kind of spelled out our pro rata ownership and our responsibilities. So that's how we structured it.
Yeah, and I love your approach, Mandy, too, because it's the same one that I have. Is that in the syndication space, when you're raising capital, it's SEC regulated offerings. Like, you have these standard terms out there of 5 years. We're going to go this. We're going to do this to the property. We're going to push rents, push NOI, hope and pray for a cap rate compression, and we're going to sell the damn thing. But with your approach on these smaller deals, you can take a much longer timeline to that, because I've raised capital from strangers before, and when I say like, yeah, we're going to be in this thing for 10 years, they're like, well, 10 years is a long time. I don't know about that. 5 years is a long time. So that tends to kind of like, and we've been seeing this in the capital markets as it relates to multifamily, that's kind of the tail that wags the dog. So tell me what was your business plan going into this deal?
So I love how you put that. And I think that having a ton of capital partners in a syndication, like I just left a medical device job where I was beholden to a bunch of rich doctors. I didn't want to be beholden to a bunch of rich investors, right? Like I wanted freedom of my own. So one of the things that was a criteria to picking business partners was the similar commitment to this buy and hold. I call it buy and watch, right? That if I'm going to buy something and you're immediately going to like offer me double the next year, then I'm dumb, I think, if I don't take you up on that sale, right? But watching what's happening in the market, but with the initial goal of being a buy and hold investor, but willing to sell if the time comes, that was a thing that we all agreed on, regardless of how much we were putting in.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So tell me about the battle scars. I mean, you had to have learned some things the hard way during this process. Like, tell me kind of bring me kind of like full circle on this deal as we close out this case study and then move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I think that partnership has been a big piece of how I've scaled. And I've had incredible partnerships like with those two guys, and I've had really terrible partnerships. I had a guy steal $110,000 from me that I was supposedly in a partnership with. So I feel like the person matters most, right? And then the intentions of what you're going to do together like matters second, right? So things that I do differently after bad partnerships, where obviously a background search happens on everybody, and that does a couple of pretty cool things. So if I see on a background search that you were speeding 20 miles over the limit in 2002, I can confront you about it. And now I've really created this opportunity to have a hard conversation. You can tell me you're great in communicating hard conversations, but if I can see it for myself, then that's kind of a whole different animal, right? So that first, that background search happens. And then second, really spelling out who owns what, especially if one of the partners is going to have an additional piece of responsibility. I had a partnership with a woman who was also the property manager. And, our commitment to measuring things was very different. My relationship with my property managers and long-term rentals in these apartment buildings was very different than what existed on this project that we were working on. And she felt pushed around because I wanted to know an occupancy number. And that would have been a great thing to have cleared up front.
So I take it you still own this asset, the 53 unit deal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if somebody's looking to pay you double what you paid for it, you might be a seller. You'd have to talk to your partners first about it though, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I could convince them,
Sounds good. Yeah, put it up on LoopNet or Cruxy. Maybe you'll get it. So
Yeah, totally.
That being said, I actually forgot to ask you about this. Was this deal on market or was it off market through a broker? Tell me about that, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, nothing makes sense at LoopNet or Cruxy. It's a trash bin of commercial real estate. And somehow there's these people that just sniff out these off market deals and make all this wealth and that sort of thing. So tell me about that.
This was listed on market. This was with a thing that I've learned, having played this game for a little while now, is if you are an expert in a market, which group most of the deals go through. So having a good relationship with one of the brokers on the team, usually the youngest and hungriest, is going to get you a ton of information around that. These brokers work really hard for their money. And they go seek out all of the people to sell so that I don't have to. And when I was ramping up, I had a full-time demanding job and I was a single mom, right? So going with brokers was the right path for me. That being said, I don't think every deal hits LoopNet or Cruxy until first they've gone through the set of buyers that close quickly, usually in the back pocket. And then secondly, the list of thousands and thousands of potential investors. So if it's gone through all of those people, that's when somebody might post things to LoopNet or Cruxy. And that's why the idea or the joke of that's where deals go to die came about.
Yeah. I've I have a confession to make. I've found actually the most recent deal we bought about a year and a half ago was on LoopNet. And it's just we bought properties on market on MLS that shouldn't have been on MLS. They should have been on LoopNet or Cruxy and everything in between. But our buying criteria has always been very specific in terms of what we like. And I just think there's all this stuff with hard and fast type of rules. You can't if it's on market, then it's not a deal. And I call BS on that one for sure. So
honestly, everything I've ever done was on market. Every larger deal I've ever done was on market.
All right. You heard it here, folks. Don't sleep on market deals. Random kind of thing here, because we have about a couple minutes left in here. I definitely want to give you the chance to shout out something you've been working on for a while that's going to help people educate themselves and be able to pick your brain without picking your brain. But we were talking a little bit about teasing out to this, kind of generational wealth thing. And I know as of right now, my 4-year-old daughter does not want my real estate holdings. But your son, might be interested in that, but I don't know, he could change his mind. So let's talk about that. Like as a parent, how you are how do you groom your kids to be the best that they can be and live the best life they can be and all that good stuff?
This is such a fun topic, and understand that the kid I made is 8, so I haven't won anything yet, but I can tell you about my approach. And I get to be bonus mom to a really awesome 11-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl. So in terms of, what we're doing, my 8-year-old is like big into cars, and he'll be like, "Mom, I want a Bugatti. Will you buy me a Bugatti?" No, but I'll help you figure out how to earn enough money to buy a Bugatti. Right. So understanding that nothing is given and things are earned is a big piece of it. Also, since the tick up in interest rates, and a thing I actually learned being part of GoBundance, the best way to store wealth, the best way to get to $1 million net worth, in my opinion, is real estate. But if you want to get to $100 million, to get there solely through real estate is a very slow and very long process. So the people who get to $100 million net worth get there with a business interest and then take chips off the table to put it into real estate. So that is now my personal ethos when it comes to investing. And because of that, we bought a car wash. So having been a farm kid who baled hay and fed the cows and did all of those things, having an actual, you've got to sweep up trash and these humbling things that rich people, quote unquote, don't do for the kids to be able to participate in, to earn money, to get to do those things or build the life that they want to build, to see that my actions, my efforts build this money, this stuff, these things, has been really a cool way to approach things.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, as being a father to a 4-year-old and also a 12-month-old he's having a lot of fun, but he's not thinking about money yet and things. He's thinking about food though. He's massive. But like my daughter, for instance, and I think this is something I don't know, for the parents out there that have kids around this age too, it's my dad was very strict, let's say. I won't go any further than that, but he made things very tough for us if we weren't doing what he expected. And I didn't, I felt that was kind of the only approach. And, in terms of my own, investing in myself as being a better, a more effective parent, is having the patience of if you keep repeating the things over and over again that they will, God willing, kind of get it, instead of being frustrated out of your mind and digging your heels in and having an all out fight with your 4-year-old kid is actually pretty cool, because these things that I've been trying to reinforce in terms of picking up the toys and cleaning that and cleaning up after yourself and that sort of thing is actually it's finally working, but it didn't happen overnight. So what do you say to that?
First off, sweet dad of a 4 and a 1-year-old. It gets worse before it gets better in terms of the mess. However, I really think that kids don't do what you tell them. Kids do what you do, what they see you doing. Right. So just living in a way that if you set your life up such that you are an example that you are proud to show to your kid, I can't think of a more powerful way to live. And I can't think of a more powerful way to teach. Right. So this opportunity now to get to be bonus mom to a 14-year-old girl, in that making big decisions about where life is going, how do I show up in a way that I'm proud if she then becomes that, that has been my approach.
Yeah, leadership by example is the only way to lead. It's the one thing about cleaning was really magical, because I'd been wiping down this table after she eats at it for months, and then the other day I was cleaning the dishes and she was over there with a rag, wiping down the table. So I was oh God, I'm so proud right now. But the Elsa dress that was full of glitter that we bought from Costco last week, she's not quite appreciative of cleaning up glitter because she thinks it's really cool to be all over the house. So, well, I digress. Mandy, you have a pretty cool offer that you're promoting out there. Tell our audience about it, and then we can also put the access to it, the URL in the show notes.
Sure. The way I bought my way out of my W-2 so that I have the space to do all this cool stuff is with these small apartment buildings. And I just, again, to kind of call back to what we've talked about 3 times now, if you don't have a path, like if you haven't decided how to get from step A to step B and all you're thinking about is mile 47, then you're not going to, be able to get there, right? So, I put together this, webinar to help you figure out what your first couple steps could be and really think about what the end result could be so that your steps are in alignment with it. So there's a little webinar on why I think small multis are exactly the right fit to help you get to that North Star that you should be chasing.
Excellent. And then where can they find that? Or is it a secret, or is it a secret website?
No, it's so on MandyMcAllister.com. Well, also, it's a webinar specific to, your North Star and figuring out those next right steps. Mm-hmm. But we'll get you the specific link directly to the webinar, but MandyMcAllister.com will link you there too.
All right. Excellent. Mandy, in closing out, any last words of advice for our target audience out there that is like, the people are looking to scale up in terms of what they can do today, this week, this month to put themselves in a position to take down that next big deal?
I think we are very kindred spirits in that single family. If once you do the math, you realize, oh my God, I have to be right 300 times to leave my W-2, right? Well, if you're going to be buying things 50 units at a time, you don't have to be right 300 times. You have to be right twice or maybe 3 times. So the level of pressure that should take off of you, doing the math, and actually on this webinar, I give away a calculator that I made to help me figure out what I needed to leave my W-2. Know what you're shooting for. Do the math with either my calculator or for yourself that will help you figure out how far you need to go. And then when you realize it's 2 or 3 buildings, like that pressure should be, help you refine that process in a bigger way.
Absolutely. Mandy, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much for being on the show. Look forward to doing a part 2 in the future. So thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk in the green room right after this.
So much fun. Thank you, Matt.